When my brother and I got into a car accident, my heart was ruptured. I needed emergency surgery, but my mother, the hospital director, called every available doctor to my brother's room. He only had a few scrapes, yet she ordered a full-body scan for him while I lay there, bleeding out. In the final 3 minutes of my life, my soul drifted to my mother's side. She was sitting beside my younger brother Felix Goodman's hospital bed, her face filled with worry as she prayed. "Felix, please don't scare me like this. Wake up, okay?" My father stood nearby, his face twisted in fury. If Sean had done his job and protected him, Felix wouldn't be in this state. "Just wait, I'm going to beat him to death." I watched from the side, bitterness rising in my chest. "Dad, there's no need for that. I'm almost dead. Not that you'd care." At that moment, the doctors were gathered around Felix's bed in a circle. After confirming that his injuries were only minor, one of the older doctors finally dared to speak up. "Miss Blanchard, are you sure we shouldn't check on Sean? His injuries from the car crash seemed very serious." My mother's gentle expression immediately twisted into one of disgust. What is he trying to pull now? Playing dead? Doesn't he realize what he's done to his brother? "Ist er her, stunt." Though my heart had already stopped, it still throbbed with pain. I was her son too. Did they really not care about me at all? Suddenly, my mother picked up her phone and dialed my number. A nurse brought the phone to my ear, and instead of the concern I had hoped for, all I heard was contempt. My heart instantly went cold, and whatever hope I had left withered away. Of course she never cared about me. Come to think of it, when I was first brought into the hospital, I had begged her to save me, but all she said was, "Do you have to fight for attention even now? Don't you realize your brother nearly broke a bone?" Then she turned and walked away without a second glance, taking the entire medical team with her to tend to Felix. The nurse, unable to bear it any longer, took the phone and said, "Miss Blanchard, Sean can't hang on much longer." But my mother, still convinced I was faking it, let out a mocking laugh. "How much did that brat pay you to act along with him? I can't believe he's capable of something like this." Just as she finished speaking, Felix, who had been pretending to be unconscious the entire time, finally opened his eyes. In a weak voice he asked, "Dad, how is Sean?" As my mother looked at the obedient, considerate Felix lying in bed, her expression twisted with deeper contempt. "Sean, why can't you be more like your brother? He's hurt because of you, and yet he's still worried about you. If you don't get here in the next 3 minutes to apologize, don't bother ever showing your face to me again." She then hung up, her chest heaving with anger. My father, standing beside her, looked visibly displeased. Why bother calling him? Isn't it enough that he nearly got Felix killed? Felix lowered his head, trying to hide the smug look in his eyes. He wore a guilty expression before looking back up at them. "Mom, Dad, don't be mad at him. Sean's just never forgiven me for getting the overseas scholarship instead of him. I understand why he hates me. Even in my death, Felix was still sowing discord between me and my parents. But they would never see through him. To them, he was always the better son, and they would never think twice about the real cause of the car accident." As expected, my mother's face immediately turned cold. What's the point of sending someone that selfish to study abroad? Who knows how twisted he become overseas? Felix gently replied, "Mom, don't be angry. I'm sure Sean had his reasons." Her expression softened at once. "Felix, you're too kind. That's why Sean keeps taking advantage of you." That was always Felix's greatest weapon. He knew exactly what to say to win our parents' hearts. I knew that even if I stood right in front of them and told them all the cruel things Felix had done over the years, they'd only slap me and accuse me of lying, saying I was just jealous of him. After all these years, I had grown used to it. In the middle of their conversation, my older sister Ashley Goodman burst into the room. Her footsteps were hurried as she anxiously rushed to check on Felix. The moment she heard about the accident, she flew in from another state without hesitation. And just like my parents, once she confirmed Felix was okay, she only cared about him. Ashley let out a sigh of relief, then fumed. "I've always said Sean is a curse to this family. Ever since Felix was born, he's been hurting him again and again." Felix seized the chance to act pitiful. "Don't be angry, Ash. I'm sure Sean didn't mean to hurt me." The entire family erupted. Dad slammed the table. "What? He actually caused the car accident to hurt you?" Mom clenched her teeth. "That bastard. I'll make him pay." Ashley's eyes turned venomous, as if she wanted to tear me apart. Felix flinched, realizing perhaps he had gone too far, and they might start questioning things. He quickly said, "Please don't be mad at Sean, okay? Maybe I remembered it wrong. No matter what, he's still my brother. He wouldn't do something like that." Ashley gently tapped his forehead. "You're too naive. You have no idea how evil some people can be." Mom nodded. "It's truly a blessing to have a son like you. All right, I'll listen to you. Let's forget that ungrateful brat, and focus on getting you well again." The warm golden light of the setting sun spilled across Felix's hospital bed. Watching the four of them together, a happy united family, I felt an indescribable ache in my chest. In that moment, I realized how out of place my soul truly was. It was as if I wasn't one of them at all, just a stray dog that had wandered into their home. I wanted to leave, but my spirit was still bound to my mother's side. I couldn't speak. I could only watch and endure their contempt in silence. A few days later, under their meticulous care, Felix was discharged. Mom was packing his things. Dad had the car waiting at the hospital door so Felix wouldn't have to walk an extra step, and Ashley wouldn't even let him put on his shoes by himself. "Sean is really something else," Mom muttered. "He didn't even visit his brother once, let alone apologize." I'm going to teach him a lesson once we get home. Dad glanced at her coldly. I told you keeping him at home was asking for trouble. Sooner or later, something bad was bound to happen. Hearing the words teach him a lesson brought back a flood of memories. Since I was little, Mom had always favored Felix. I was expected to give in to him. It all started the day Felix was born. I'd accidentally spilled water, causing Mom to slip and go into premature labor. Seeing him in the incubator shattered the whole family. Dad hit me so hard my eardrum burst. Mom, lying weakly in bed, looked at me with deep disappointment. Later, in elementary school, Dad beat me so badly I couldn't get out of bed for 3 days, all because I fought with Felix over a toy car, a freebie that came with a gift Dad had brought for Felix. That one toy became my most treasured possession. But Felix, who already had boxes of cars, insisted on having it. When I refused, he screamed and cried. Mom came running, hugging him and yelling at me. Sean Goodman, your brother's already suffered so much because of you. What more do you want from him? Before I could explain, Felix shed a few tears and said, Mom, don't be angry. It was my fault. I shouldn't have fought with Sean. When Dad came home and saw that scene, he dragged me aside and beat me. A cold-hearted kid like you doesn't deserve to live in this house. Keeping you here is just asking for disaster. I cried and begged, but the more I cried, the more convinced he became that I was faking, and the harder he hit. After that, whenever Felix cried, it meant beatings or scoldings for me. Eventually, I stopped fighting, stopped trying to explain, stopped trying to be loved. And now they had left me cold and lifeless on the operating table. Back at home, Felix flopped onto the couch and said he was hungry. Ashley eagerly entered the kitchen, trying to show off her newfound cooking skills. Normally too delicate to cook, she now scrolled through her phone for meal plans. Dad presented Felix with the latest luxury gaming console as a welcome home gift for surviving. Mom had cleaned his room and filled it with air-purifying plants. Felix simply lounged on the couch and played games, and that was enough to melt everyone's hearts. Meanwhile, my soul followed quietly behind them. The house, once so familiar, now felt ice cold. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. It was someone I knew all too well, my girlfriend, Caitlin Winter. She stepped inside and immediately fussed over Felix. Mr. and Mrs. Goodman, I heard Felix was discharged today. I brought some supplements for him. Felix dropped his controller, smiling shyly. Caitlin, you didn't have to. I'm already feeling much better. Caitlin smiled sweetly. Normally cold and distant with me, she was now warm and gentle with Felix. I watched her, a strange feeling rising in my chest. She asked, "Where's Sean?" If she hadn't mentioned me, I doubt anyone would have remembered I existed. Mom's face darkened. Why are you bringing up that ungrateful brat? After I scolded him, he didn't even come home. It's better this way. The house is more peaceful without him. Caitlin nodded quickly. It's better if he stays away. We don't want him disturbing Felix's recovery. Ashley walked out holding supplements and teased. So, have you decided when to break up with Sean? If you don't move fast, someone else might snatch Felix away. Caitlin looked down shyly. I was actually planning to talk to him about it today. A stinging sensation rose in my throat. I let out a bitter laugh and turned away. I had long gotten used to being unloved. Later that night, Mom grew irritable for some reason. She returned to her room and began searching her phone. I walked over and saw she was calling my number over and over again. Of course, there was no answer. Eventually, she slammed her phone down in frustration. You won't even answer my calls now? Do you think anyone actually cares about you? I wanted to tell her I was dead, that there was no way for me to answer. But then she called the nurse. Did Sean tell you what kind of stunt he's pulling? Tell him to stop being shameless and come back to apologize to his brother. Maybe then I'll consider letting him come home. There was a brief silence on the line before the nurse replied. Miss Blanchard, Sean passed away a week ago. His heart was ruptured in the car accident. But you had called all the doctors to Felix's room, so there was no one left to operate on him. The morning after my death, the world moved on without pause. The sun rose just as bright, casting golden beams across the white walls of the Goodman residence. Birds chirped outside, cheerful and indifferent. Inside, Felix was nestled under a plush blanket on the living room couch, a faint smile on his lips as he scrolled through his phone. My soul drifted quietly nearby, unseen, unnoticed. Mom came bustling in with a tray of freshly cut fruit and a glass of warm milk. She sat beside Felix, brushing his hair back affectionately. You poor thing, you look so pale. Did you sleep well? She asked, her voice thick with concern. Felix nodded weakly, then took a bite of the apple slice she offered. It had always amazed me how effortlessly he could feign weakness to extract love from others. He had perfected the art. Ashley entered a moment later, still in her workout clothes, holding a small bottle of vitamins. These are the ones that Doctor Online recommended for recovery. I already checked the reviews, she said as she handed them over. Felix gave her a grateful smile. Thank you, Ash. I stood at the doorway, invisible, forgotten, watching this display of love and unity. It had only been a day. One single day since I bled out on an operating table. And yet, not one word of mourning. Not one candle. Not even a mention of a funeral. No one wore black. No one cried. Not even a passing mention of regret. I was gone, and it was as if I had never existed. Mom looked up suddenly. Did you guys see Caitlin's post last night? She put up a picture of the supplements she brought for Felix. I think she used one of those sparkle filters. It looks so cute. Ashley rolled her eyes playfully. She is really trying hard these days. I think she is ready to make the switch. Felix looked embarrassed. Come on, guys. Caitlin is still dating Sean. Mom scoffed. San? That disgrace? Please. You are the one who needs someone kind by your side. Not someone like Sean, always complaining, always looking for sympathy. I wanted to scream, but there was no air in my lungs. No voice left to carry my pain. Ashley added with a grin. She already told me she plans to break up with him officially after this week. She just wants to do it gently for appearances. Gently. That word echoed in my hollow chest like a cruel joke. I remembered the first time I met Caitlin. It was during freshman orientation. She had been sitting alone on the grass, reading a book about ancient civilizations. Her voice had been soft, her eyes a cool shade of gray. I had fallen quickly foolishly. And now she was choosing Felix. Choosing him over my memory. Over my love. As the day progressed, I followed my family silently, watching as they moved about with ease. Happiness returning to their lives without even a dent from my absence. In the afternoon, Dad brought in takeout from Felix's favorite restaurant. The table was filled with fragrant dishes, but there was no extra plate. Not even a symbolic one for the son who had once eaten there beside them. Sean always hated spicy food, Ashley said absent-mindedly as she chewed. Good thing we don't have to cater to him anymore. Dad chuckled. That boy was always picky. No one contradicted them. No one said that I was more than just my preferences. No one defended my name. I wanted to walk out, to leave this house, but I couldn't. My soul was tethered, bound to a family that never truly wanted me. Later that night, as the stars appeared in the sky, Mom stood on the back porch holding a glass of wine. She stared up at the sky in silence. I approached her side, unsure why. Maybe some part of me still hoped she would say my name. Whisper a memory. A single tear. Anything. Instead, she muttered bitterly to the night air. Why did you have to be so dramatic, Sean? You always made things so difficult. I stepped back. So that was it. Even in death, I was a burden to her. The next day, the house was visited by distant relatives. Aunts, uncles, cousins, most of them there to check on Felix. They brought gifts, well wishes, cards with carefully chosen words like miracle and blessed. When one of the younger cousins asked where I was, Mom simply replied, Sean. He's away. Away. That was the word she chose to erase me. Not past. Not resting. Just away. I followed my cousin as he walked down the hallway. He passed the guest room. My room. It had already been cleaned out. My posters were gone. My books, my guitar, my blue comforter. Everything had vanished, like dust swept under a rug. In its place stood a new white desk, some plants, and a foldable treadmill. It was as if they had been waiting for the first excuse to erase me. Death had simply made it convenient. On the third day, Caitlin returned. She wore a soft yellow dress and brought a new set of vitamin supplements. She laughed at Felix's jokes and even braided Ashley's hair as they sat together watching TV. Watching them, I realized something terrible. They were happier without me. Freer. Lighter. I was the family's shadow, the black sheep, the crack in their otherwise perfect mirror. And now, with me gone, the reflection was whole again. Caitlin leaned close to Felix and whispered something that made him blush. I had seen that expression before. It used to be mine. And now it belonged to him. Mom entered the room with a wrapped box. I bought you something, Felix. It is the limited edition set you liked. Felix opened the box with childlike excitement. Inside was a pristine watch, silver and gold, the same one I had admired years ago, only to be told it was too expensive. That same day, Mom had scolded me for dreaming too big. But now she was giving it to Felix, no hesitation. You deserve the best, she said, kissing his forehead. A part of me broke completely in that moment. No more illusions. No more hope. They never loved me. They only tolerated me. That night, I drifted outside the house. I stared at the stars. I wondered what came next. Could a soul fade from grief? Did spirits vanish when their pain became too heavy? I thought back to the nurse. The one person who had cared. Her voice had trembled when she whispered to my mother over the phone. Sean passed away a week ago. His heart was ruptured in the car accident. But you had called all the doctors to Felix's room, so there was no one left to operate on him. Even then, Mom had not believed her. He is faking it, she had snapped. Looking for attention. That sentence clung to me like a curse. Faking it. Looking for attention. Those were the words I carried into the afterlife. The next morning, I found myself back at the hospital. The operating room where I had died was quiet and sterile. No trace of blood. No trace of me. But then I saw something that stopped me. A small bouquet of white flowers. Placed discreetly on the metal table. There was no card. But I knew who it had been. The nurse. She remembered. She had seen me. That fragile kindness, so small yet so vast, was the first warmth I had felt since my death. I stayed there for hours, silent beside those flowers, letting their presence comfort me. Eventually, I left. I did not return home. That house was no longer mine. Instead, I wandered the city. The school where I had studied. The park bench where I had kissed Caitlin for the first time. The alley where Felix had once pushed me and laughed. And as I wandered, I began to understand. I was no longer part of their world. But I still existed. And maybe, just maybe, I could still find peace. Not by seeking love from those who never gave it, but by learning to let go. My story was not over yet. Not until I found the reason I was still here. Not until I gave meaning to my own ending. And so I turned away from the past. And took my first step toward what came next. The wind was cold the day I returned to the cemetery. Not because I had chosen to, but because something in me needed to see the truth with my own eyes. My grave. My name carved into stone. Proof that I had once walked this earth. The cemetery was quiet, tucked behind a row of maple trees that whispered in the breeze. The sun filtered through the leaves in golden shafts. A man with a watering can moved silently between graves, tending to flowers with gentle care. I drifted past the gate, no longer feeling the weight of footsteps. The air passed through me. My presence did not disturb a single leaf. And then I found it. Tucked in a back corner, surrounded by older, unkempt stones. Sean Goodman. Born April 4th. Died September 28th. No quote. No flowers. No sign that anyone had visited. Just a bare stone. Cold. Unfeeling. My entire life reduced to a name and 2 dates. I stared at it for a long time. Not in shock, but in confirmation. So they really had buried me after all. I expected a swell of emotion. Anger. Grief. Anything. But there was only a strange kind of stillness. The silence of something that had long since broken. The only trace that someone had been here recently was a small crumpled wrapper beside the headstone. A candy wrapper. One of the kind Felix used to chew on after gym class. Had he come? Had he stood here? Even for a moment? I would never know. Suddenly, I heard a voice. Low and trembling. He was always so quiet. But I thought that meant he was just shy, not hurting. I turned and saw her. The nurse from the hospital. She stood alone, wearing a simple black coat and clutching a bouquet of daisies. She knelt beside my grave, brushing away the dead leaves. "I'm sorry, Sean," she whispered. "I tried. I really did. I told them. I told her you needed help. But no one listened." She placed the flowers on the grass and bowed her head. "You deserved better." And just like that, I cried. Not with tears, but with memory. The soft ache of someone finally saying what I had wanted to hear all my life. She stayed there for a while, talking softly. Stories I had never told her. Observations she had noticed. How I always smiled even when I was in pain. How I always said thank you. It was the longest anyone had talked about me since I died. After she left, I remained beside the grave. I did not follow her. Instead, I let her words linger, wrapping around me like a fragile blanket. Later that evening, the sky turned gray. Clouds gathered, heavy with rain. I returned home, more out of habit than anything else. The house was loud again. Laughter echoed from the living room. Dad was watching TV with Felix, their voices animated as they argued over some sports match. Ashley was painting her nails in the corner, Caitlin sitting beside her, showing her something on her phone. No one mentioned my name. No one paused. No silence fell when they passed the hallway where my room had once been. To them, life had reset. But I was still watching. Still waiting. And then I saw it. The file. On Dad's desk. A large manila envelope labeled in neat handwriting. Goodman case, internal report. I slipped closer, curious. Inside were copies of medical records. Emergency reports. The kind that usually remained confidential. And as I scanned the pages, I saw it. A note written by one of the junior doctors. Patient Sean Goodman arrived at 4:16 p.m. Ruptured myocardium. Immediate surgery required. Transfer to or 2 recommended. But then below it, another line. Redirected by Director Blanchard to room 3A for observation. Priority assigned to Felix Goodman. It was there. In writing. The order. My mother had pulled the team from my room to Felix's. And because of that decision, I was left unattended. I died waiting. And she had never admitted it. I turned the page and saw a second note. A complaint filed anonymously. It had been marked as closed. No action taken. I scanned further. Buried among the pages was an email. An internal message between 2 hospital staff. "Can you believe what happened to that boy? The one with a heart injury? I heard Director Blanchard ordered a full team for her other son instead." Yeah, and he only had scrapes, right? Poor kid. I felt something burn in my chest. Rage. Grief. But also vindication. I had not imagined it. It had happened. It was real. And it had been buried just like I was. I moved through the house like a ghost, because that was exactly what I was. No voice. No justice. No place to rest. Later that night, I followed Felix to his room. He was texting someone, smiling to himself. The glow from his screen lit up his face. He looked so innocent. So beloved. And yet I knew the truth. The car accident had not been an accident. I remembered the moment, clearer now than ever. We had been in the car together, arguing. Felix had said something cruel. Something about how I should have never been born. I had turned to him, anger flaring, and shouted back. And then he had grabbed the wheel. Just for a second. Just enough to send us veering off the road. He had screamed after, acted confused, dazed, hurt. But I had seen the flash in his eyes. Deliberate. Calculated. He had known exactly what he was doing. I stared at him now, wondering how someone could wear so many masks. And why no one else ever seemed to notice. Suddenly, a soft knock came at his door. Caitlin. She entered quietly, a nervous smile on her face. "Hey," she said. "Can we talk?" He nodded, setting his phone aside. She sat beside him. "I've been thinking. About everything. About us." Felix looked up, concern on his face. She hesitated. "I loved Sean. I really did. But lately, I don't know." He tilted his head. "I mean, he was so cold sometimes. Always busy, always distracted." That was not true. I had always made time. Always tried. Always gave more than I had. She continued. "You've been so kind to me lately, Felix. And after everything with the accident, I feel like maybe I misunderstood things. He reached out and touched her hand. It's okay, Caitlin. You don't have to explain. I watched as she leaned into his shoulder. I wanted to feel angry, but I just felt tired. The truth was Caitlin had made her choice. Maybe she had never really loved me, or maybe she had simply loved the version of me she imagined. Either way, I was not in that room anymore. And they were. Two people moving on. I drifted out into the hallway. The house felt colder now, not because of the temperature, but because of the hollowness that filled every room I used to call mine. I ended up outside, beneath the sky, staring up at stars that no longer looked the same. I had died, but my story had not ended, because a truth was still buried, and I had to find a way to bring it to light, even if no one could see me, even if no one believed. I would not disappear, not until they knew, not until someone said my name, not in hatred but in sorrow, not until someone looked back and said, we were wrong. Until then I would remain, a shadow in the corner, a breath in the silence, a ghost named Sean Goodman. I did not know ghosts could feel cold until I stood outside my old high school. The building had not changed. The same beige bricks, the same chipped blue lockers visible through the glass doors. The memories hit me like a wave. I remembered the days I used to walk these halls, headphones in, head down, hoping no one would notice me. Felix had been the golden boy here too, captain of the soccer team, straight A student, always surrounded by friends and admirers. And me? I was his shadow. The quiet brother who did his homework early, who sat in the library alone during lunch, who got forgotten during school award nights. I moved through the hall like a mist, watching students pass, none of them sensing the presence slipping between them. On the second floor, I found something unexpected. A mural, painted in bright colors. It showed scenes of kindness and community. And there, at the bottom right, was a small square dedicated to Felix Goodman, hero, survivor, inspiration. It showed a stylized version of him, smiling with a bandage on his head, surrounded by supportive words. I stared at it, stunned. They had made him a hero, because he had survived the accident, because he had cried on camera during an assembly the week after I died, telling everyone how he missed me, how he wished he could turn back time. That speech had gone viral on social media. One teacher had posted a clip with the caption, "This boy's strength after losing his brother is a lesson to us all." The comments were flooded with hearts. People calling him brave, beautiful, strong. No one had asked what really happened. No one knew he had grabbed the steering wheel. And the only person who had tried to warn the world, me, was already buried under the ground. I turned away from the mural and drifted to the library. The same scent of paper and dust lingered. I passed the row of books where I used to sit. To my surprise, there was a student there now. A boy no older than 15, scribbling notes furiously, headphones dangling from his neck. He looked familiar. Then I remembered. Elliot, one of the few underclassmen I had tutored in math. He had been quiet, nervous, but always grateful. I watched as he pulled a notebook from his bag. The cover had stickers on it. One of them was mine. A small blue emblem I had given him after our last session. A thank you sticker just for fun. He had kept it. As if feeling my gaze, Elliot paused. He looked around, eyes scanning the library. He could not see me, but he frowned slightly, unsettled. I stepped back. That was enough. Just a small trace of my presence still lingering in someone's memory. I left the school soon after. I did not belong there anymore. As I floated through the city, something inside me shifted. The need for justice was still there. The ache of betrayal. The wound of being erased. But there was something else too. A question. Why was I still here? Most ghosts, I imagined, had unfinished business. Mine was obvious, the truth. But how to reveal it? How to speak when I had no voice? Then I remembered something. The nurse. Her name had been Clara. She had seen me. She had spoken for me, even after death. And she worked at the hospital still. If anyone could help, it was her. That night, I returned to the hospital. It was quiet. The hallways dim, machines humming softly in patient rooms. Clara was on the second floor, sorting supplies. I hovered near the doorway, unsure of what to do. She paused, then turned her head slightly. "Hello," she asked, as if sensing something. I focused every ounce of my will. The tray beside her rattled. She gasped, backing away. "Sean," she whispered. "My name." It cut through the silence like lightning. "Can you hear me?" she asked. I could not answer, but I moved the tray again. She took a deep breath, trembling. "You're still here." She looked around, eyes wide. "Why are you still here?" I wished I could tell her everything. The accident. The cover-up. The way my parents had looked at me like I was nothing more than a burden. I knocked a pen to the floor. She picked it up, thinking. "If you're here, does that mean something's wrong?" she asked. I tapped the tray once. "Yes. Do you want me to find something?" Another tap. "Do you want me to talk to someone?" Silence. I did not know what to say. Did I want her to talk to my mother? My father? Felix? Would they even listen? Clara sat down, heart pounding. Then she stood and grabbed her phone. "I'm going to review the files again. I'm going to find out what really happened." I followed her as she went to the records room. She pulled up the files on her tablet and began scrolling. And then she froze. "It's not here. The report. The original scans. They're gone." I felt a chill run through me. Someone had erased it. Erased the evidence. Clara looked shaken. She tapped the screen again. Nothing. She pulled up a backup. Still nothing. "They deleted everything," she whispered. "Your whole record is missing." Not Felix's. Just yours. I rattled the tray again, this time harder. She stood up. No. I won't let this happen. She began pulling papers from the archive. Her hands shook, but she kept going. She found copies of her own notes. Her private journal entries. She had written down what happened that day, just in case. She scanned them into her device. I'll send this to the medical board, she whispered. I'll tell them everything. And then she paused. But they won't believe me. They'll say I'm trying to destroy Director Blanchard's reputation. She turned to the air. Sean, I want to help you. But I need more proof. A voice. Something they can't deny. I tapped once. She nodded. I'll find a way. The next morning, Clara called in sick. Instead, she visited my old school, my neighborhood, the scene of the crash. She talked to witnesses. She found a camera from a nearby gas station. When she reviewed the footage, her face went pale. It showed the car. Swerving. A hand reaching from the passenger seat. Felix's hand, grabbing the wheel. She whispered, "Oh my God." She sent a copy to her private cloud. Then she sent a message. To the board. To a reporter. To the police. And that night, all hell broke loose. News stations picked up the leak. Online forums exploded with theories. Did Sean Goodman die because of negligence? Did Felix cause the crash? Was Director Blanchard involved in a cover-up? The Goodman family issued a statement denying everything. But the damage was done. And through it all, I stood beside Clara, silent but no longer helpless. The truth had a voice now. Her voice. She had seen me, heard me, fought for me. And slowly, I began to feel something I had not felt since the moment my heart stopped beating. Light. The beginning of release. But my story was not done yet. Because Felix had seen the news too. And his smile was gone. For the first time he looked afraid. Afraid of what might come next. And that, perhaps, was only the beginning. The morning after the news broke, the Goodman household was no longer a place of laughter. Instead of warmth and noise, silence gripped the halls like a heavy fog. Felix sat alone in the kitchen, staring blankly at the television. Every major network had picked up the story. Headlines scrolled across the screen. Hospital director under investigation after son's death. Evidence emerges in Sean Goodman case. Felix Goodman questioned about car crash inconsistencies. I stood behind him, silent as always, watching the shadows creep into his expression. His fingers trembled as he reached for the remote and muted the volume, but it was too late. The truth was out, and for the first time, Felix could not spin it into something that suited him. He pulled out his phone. His notifications were endless. Messages from classmates, journalists, and even fans who now turned against him. I always thought Sean was the jealous one message read. But maybe we were wrong about him. Another said, Felix Goodman is not the angel he made himself out to be. I watched his hands clench. He opened a private chat. Caitlin. Felix, did you see the news? Caitlin, is it true? Felix, of course not. Sean's death was an accident. Caitlin, they found footage. They said you pulled the wheel. Felix, that's taken out of context. Caitlin, please. Caitlin, Felix, I need some space. He stared at the screen. Then he threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall with a loud crack and dropped to the floor, screen shattered. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Mom appeared in the doorway, pale and furious. What did you do? She hissed. Felix stood defiant. I didn't do anything. Do you think I'm stupid? She snapped. Do you think I didn't see the footage? It was an accident. Felix, she insisted. Sean grabbed the wheel first. I just tried to stop him. Liar. She didn't say it. But I did. I said it over and over again in the depths of my mind. Liar. For the first time, I saw something in my mother's eyes that had never been there before, doubt. She turned and stormed off, leaving Felix standing there alone, his confidence shaken. Later that day, the hospital board called an emergency meeting. Clara was there, her face calm but determined. She submitted her files. Her notes. The timestamp surveillance video from the gas station. Her signed affidavit about the redirected doctors on the day of my death. Mom sat at the head of the table, her hands clasped, expression unreadable. Director Blanchard, one of the board members began. We reviewed the footage. And the testimony. I watched her closely. Her mouth tightened. Her shoulders stiffened. It was an emotionally charged moment, she said. I made a judgment call. I didn't realize Sean's condition was that critical. Another board member frowned. But he had a ruptured heart. Why did you redirect all available staff to your other son? She hesitated. Felix had always been fragile. He was hyperventilating. I thought Sean was exaggerating his pain to gain attention. You made the decision as a mother, not a doctor, the chairman said flatly. There was silence. The board concluded the meeting with emotion. A temporary suspension while the matter was reviewed externally. Clara exited the room and sat quietly in the hallway. Her hands were still shaking. You did it, I whispered inside. I wish I could thank you. But all I could do was watch. That evening, Ashley returned from her job across state lines. She barged into the house, her usual energy dimmed. What the hell is going on? She demanded, throwing her purse on the table. Felix stayed silent. Mom sat on the couch, arms crossed. Ashley's eyes darted between them. Is it true? Felix stood up. Of course not. It's a witch hunt. Sean. He always wanted to ruin things for me, even from beyond the grave. You pulled the steering wheel, Ashley said, her voice ice. Felix's jaw dropped. What? I talked to Caitlin. She told me everything. The fight. The way you told her to stay quiet. And I saw the footage. It's not out of context, Felix. It's real. Mom looked like she had been slapped. Ashley stepped closer. I covered for you so many times. I always believed you when you cried. But now I wonder, how many times was Sean telling the truth? Felix opened his mouth, then closed it. Ashley left without another word. And for the first time, the golden boy had no defenders. That night, I followed Clara to her apartment. She sat by the window, sipping tea, watching the rain fall in streaks across the glass. A soft knock echoed at her door. She opened it slowly. It was Caitlin. Her eyes red. Her hands trembling. I need to talk to someone, she said. Clara nodded and let her in. I listened as Caitlin spilled everything. How Felix manipulated her. How he used my death to garner sympathy. How he twisted every truth until even she began to doubt her own memories. He told me Sean always wanted to hurt him, Caitlin whispered. That he had to defend himself. But that's not what happened, is it? Clara reached across the table and took her hand. No, it's not. They sat in silence. Then Caitlin spoke again. He's dangerous. And no one ever stopped him. I realized something important in that moment. My death was not just about neglect. It was about a lifetime of being silenced. And now, the silence was breaking, piece by piece. The next day, the police opened a formal investigation. Felix was summoned for questioning. The footage, the inconsistencies, the testimonies. He arrived with a lawyer, but he looked different, deflated, smaller. The press surrounded the precinct. When asked if he had anything to say to the public, Felix stared at the cameras for a long moment, then said, I never meant for any of this to happen. No one believed him. Not anymore. I returned to my grave that night. Clara had placed new flowers there. A note tucked among the stems read, We remember. We believe. We are sorry. I knelt beside it. And I felt something shift. A lightness. The tether to this world loosening, just a little. But I wasn't done yet. Because one person still hadn't said my name. My mother. Until she did, I couldn't go. Not yet. The days grew colder. Leaves drifted from the trees like silent reminders of everything fading, everything ending. In the Goodman household, the mood had shifted completely. No one spoke freely anymore. The laughter was gone. The curtains stayed drawn. The phones rang endlessly and were left unanswered. Felix no longer went outside. He remained in his room, the same place where he once played video games and smiled for family photos. Now it had become a fortress of silence. He kept the blinds closed and the lights off, his world shrinking with every hour. I stood in the corner of his room many nights. Not for revenge, but to understand. How someone could lie so well. How a brother could erase another with a smile. But Felix was not smiling anymore. I watched him stare at the wall, unmoving, as the news cycle circled him like vultures. His name was everywhere. And not in the way he wanted. Mom no longer defended him. In fact, she barely spoke at all. She spent her days pacing the hallways, her shoes silent against the hardwood floor. Her phone no longer rang with admiration. Her title as hospital director was suspended pending the ongoing investigation. Her colleagues, once eager to align themselves with her, had withdrawn. And worst of all, she could no longer run from what she had done. I followed her every night as she paced, stopping at random to stare at framed photos on the wall. One in particular held her gaze longer than the others. It was a photo of the entire family, taken on Felix's graduation day. Felix in the center, grinning with his diploma. Ashley on one side, Mom and Dad on the other. I was not in the photo. I had taken it. I remembered that day well. How I had offered to take the picture. How no one invited me into the frame afterward. I watched her eyes linger on the space beside Felix, as if she now noticed it was empty. As if it had always been wrong. She walked into the kitchen and opened the drawer where she kept old letters and school report cards. I saw her fingers tremble as she pulled out one of mine. An old essay. From 7th grade. I had written about wanting to become a doctor. About helping people. About healing the broken. She read it slowly, her eyes moving across my childish handwriting. And then she cried. Not loud sobs. Not tears of rage or guilt. But the quiet kind. The kind that comes from a place far deeper than pride. She sat at the kitchen table, the paper pressed to her chest. I stepped closer. This was the first time since my death that she mourned. Not publicly. Not in words. But in the private space of memory. She whispered into the silence, barely audible. I failed you. I didn't know if I was imagining it or if it was real. But I felt the words reach me. I failed you, Sean. Later that night, she stood in front of the bathroom mirror. Her face was pale. Her eyes hollow. Her fingers gripped the edges of the sink. Who am I now, she whispered. The director who let her son die? The mother who ignored the signs? She stared into the mirror like she expected someone to answer. And so I did. Not in voice, but in presence. I touched the light. It flickered. She gasped. Sean, she whispered. She looked into the mirror again, her eyes wide. I stepped behind her. She could not see me, but she knew. I never thought it would end like this, she whispered. I thought I was protecting the one who needed me most. But I chose wrong, didn't I? I waited. She reached for the drawer beside the sink and pulled out a small box. Inside was a bracelet. Mine. The one I had worn since I was 12. A gift from my grandmother. Simple blue threads woven together. I had lost it in the crash. She had found it afterward. Kept it. She held it in both hands now, and for the first time, she broke completely. I thought you were faking it. Like always. I thought you just wanted attention. But you weren't. You were dying. And I walked away. She sank to the floor, her back against the cabinet. I could have saved you. I should have saved you. She clutched the bracelet like it was all she had left of me. I sat beside her even though she could not feel it. Even though she would never know I was there. But I forgave her. Because despite everything, the years of neglect, the favoritism, the silence, this moment was real. This grief was real. And it meant something. The next morning, she sat with Ashley and handed her a letter. Please make sure the board gets this, she said. Ashley opened it. Her eyes widened. This is your resignation. I'm not fit to lead, Mom said. Not anymore. And this is my statement about what really happened. Ashley blinked. You're admitting everything. Yes, everything. Felix appeared in the doorway. His voice was dry. So we're just throwing me to the wolves now. Mom turned slowly. You made your choices, Felix. And so did I. He stepped forward. His voice rose. I didn't mean for him to die. But he did, she said, cutting him off. Because of you. And because of me. She stood and walked past him, leaving the room. For the first time in his life, Felix was not the center of her attention. He was simply a boy with nowhere left to hide. I followed her as she left the house. She did not go to the hospital. She went to the cemetery. To me. She knelt beside my grave and placed the bracelet down gently. I don't know if you're still here, she said. But I needed you to know. You were my son too. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The wind shifted. A warmth spread across my chest. Something breaking loose. Something setting me free. For the first time, I felt ready. Not gone. But at peace. My name had been spoken. Not in anger. But in sorrow. In truth. And in love. The world did not pause when the truth came out. No great silence swept over the city. No bells rang. No collective breath was held. But things changed. Slowly. Quietly. One thread at a time. The media storm surrounding the Goodman family intensified. It was no longer just about hospital negligence or a misdiagnosed injury. Now it was about accountability. About how a brilliant, promising young man had been erased because he was not the favorite. Because he had been invisible. My story was no longer hidden behind hospital walls or whispered at school hallways. Clara's statement had been published in full. Anonymous nurses came forward with their own stories. How they had seen me begging for help. How they had been told to wait. One nurse said in her interview. He kept looking at the door like someone he loved was going to walk through and save him. But no one came. That sentence stuck with people. It stuck with me. Because it was true. No one came. Until now. Ashley, my older sister, became a surprising voice of reason. In a televised interview, she admitted everything. I was cruel to my brother, she said plainly. I called him a curse. I told him he was the problem. But the truth is, he was just trying to survive in a family that refused to see him. She paused, then added, I failed him too. When asked why she was speaking out, she said, because I don't want him to be remembered for how he died. I want people to remember how he lived. Quiet, kind, patient, even when we didn't deserve it. I stood beside the screen as the interview played, and I felt something shift again. It was strange to see someone defend me, to speak of me not as a problem, but as a person. Ashley had always followed Mom's lead, but now she was walking a different path. In her next interview, she was asked directly, do you believe Felix caused the crash on purpose? She did not hesitate. Yes, she said. That single word rippled through every media outlet like lightning. Felix was no longer just a boy caught in the middle of family grief. He was a suspect. And now the authorities could not look away. Investigators reopened the case under criminal review. Felix hired a new lawyer. But public opinion was no longer on his side. Even Caitlin, once loyal and confused, gave her testimony. He told me Sean had it coming, she said, her voice shaking. He told me he deserved to be punished for being jealous. But Sean never hurt anyone. He just wanted to be loved. That was the moment I knew Felix had no one left. Not even the mask could protect him now. The trial was scheduled. Not for murder. But for reckless endangerment resulting in death. It was not perfect justice. But it was something. And I would take it. In the weeks leading up to the trial, Mom disappeared from the public eye. She stayed home. Grieving. Writing. Making calls to families she had wronged. I watched her transform. Not overnight but day by day. She no longer walked with arrogance. She walked with remorse. She no longer barked orders. She asked questions. She visited the cemetery every Sunday. Sometimes she brought flowers. Sometimes she brought nothing at all. Just herself. One morning, I found her sitting beside my grave, reading aloud from one of my old essays. You once wrote, I want to help people feel less invisible. And you did. Even now. Her voice cracked. You changed more lives in death than I ever did in my entire career. She closed the paper and whispered, I wish I had listened sooner. Behind her, a small group gathered. Classmates. Co-workers. Journalists. It had been a month since my death. Clara had organized a public memorial. They had printed a photo of me, not one from school, but one Clara had found on a patient thank you card, where I was smiling softly, wearing scrubs during my internship. Beneath the photo, the plaque read, Sean Goodman. You were seen. You were loved. You still matter. As the crowd gathered, Ashley stepped forward. She held the microphone with a calm, steady hand. We are not here to make excuses, she said. We are not here to rewrite the past. We are here to say the words we never said when it mattered. She looked at the sky. Sean, I'm sorry. Her voice broke. And thank you. Clara followed. She shared the story of how I once helped an elderly patient reconnect with his daughter by using the hospital phone late at night. He never told anyone, she said. He just did it. That was the kind of person he was. More stories followed. A boy from school who said I had shared my umbrella with him one rainy morning even though we were strangers. A teacher who recalled I had corrected a grading error on an exam even though it cost me my top score. Each story a thread. Each memory a spark. And I stood in the center of it all, unseen but not unknown. For the first time, I was being remembered as I had been. Not as someone to pity, or to blame, but as someone who mattered. That night, Felix sat alone in his room. The house was quiet. Empty even with people inside. He watched a clip of the memorial online. His face unreadable. Then slowly he turned to the camera in his hand. He pressed record. And for the first time he spoke. Sean, I don't know if you're still here. Or if you can hear this. He paused. I was always afraid you'd outshine me. Even when no one noticed you, I was afraid. Because you were good. You were kind. And I wasn't. He looked away. I did grab the wheel. I told myself it was an accident. But deep down, I wanted to scare you. I wanted to see fear in your eyes. I wanted to feel in control for once. His voice cracked. But I saw what it did to you. And I ran. I kept lying. Because it was easier than facing the truth. He took a shaky breath. I'm sorry. I know that's not enough. But I am. He ended the recording. And for the first time, he cried without pretending. He cried like someone who finally saw himself for what he had become. The video was never made public. But I saw it. And it was enough. Not for forgiveness. But for truth. The trial came quickly. The verdict was clear. Felix was sentenced to 2 years in a juvenile rehabilitation facility, followed by community service and mandatory therapy. Some said it was too light. Some said it was too harsh. I said nothing. Because justice is never perfect. But truth is healing. And truth had finally found its way through. I returned to my grave one last time. The grass had grown soft. The sky was pale with morning light. Mom knelt beside the stone, tracing my name with her fingers. We'll visit every week, she said. You're part of this family. No matter what. Ashley stood beside her, holding a single daisy. Clara came too. And behind them, a quiet crowd. Friends. Strangers. People I had touched in small ways. I was gone. But I was no longer forgotten. I was no longer invisible. I was loved. And as the breeze moved through the trees, I felt something lift. A warmth. A peace. I looked up. The light was calling. But I had one thing left to do. One chapter more. Before I could let go. The wind carried the scent of morning rain as the world stirred awake. The cemetery was quiet, but not empty. I stood near my own grave, no longer weighed down by sorrow, but not yet ready to leave. There was one last thing I needed. Not vengeance. Not even justice. Closure. Across the path, Clara stood with a small notebook in her hands. She had become something of a guardian of my memory, visiting, checking in with my family, answering emails from strangers who had read my story and wanted to know more. She had made it her mission to make sure people remembered me for who I was, not just for how I died. That morning, she read aloud from the notebook. It was something she had written for a medical journal, part memoir, part testimony. She had titled it, The Boy Who Was Never Heard, A Lesson in Listening. She read a section I had heard her practice before. Sean Goodman did not raise his voice. He did not demand attention. He did not make scenes. And maybe that was why no one saw how much pain he carried. But it was there. And it deserved to be seen. The lesson we must learn is simple. Listen. Even to silence. Especially to silence. She closed the notebook and looked toward the sky. Thank you, Sean, she whispered. For changing the way I care. I felt something shift again. Not pain this time. Gratitude. I drifted from the cemetery that day and visited the house one final time. It was no longer heavy with grief. It was quiet, but in a softer way. In the hallway, the photo wall had changed. My picture had been added. A real one this time. Not a school ID photo, not something formal. Just me laughing in the backyard, barefoot, holding a garden hose like a sword while Felix ran from the spray. It had been one of the few carefree moments we shared. Mom stood in front of the photo now, arms crossed, eyes distant. She was wearing a simple sweater. No makeup. Her hair pulled back. Ashley came up beside her and placed a hand on her shoulder. He would be proud of you, Ashley said. Mom didn't answer. But her eyes glistened. I followed her into the kitchen as she prepared a tray of food, vegetables, toast, a thermos of tea. Then she picked up a tote bag with hospital files and got into her car. She wasn't going back to her old job. She was volunteering now. At a clinic that treated underfunded youth. Her title was gone. But her purpose had finally arrived. She had learned to listen. And in that I found peace. Felix, too, was changing. Slowly. In the rehabilitation facility, he had begun attending sessions. He spoke less. But he listened more. One afternoon, I watched him sit across from a group of teenagers discussing guilt and forgiveness. He didn't cry. He didn't perform. He just said one thing. I hurt my brother because I didn't know how to love myself. And I want to learn. No applause followed. No approval. Just a silence that for once felt honest. I drifted through the old school one last time. The mural was still there, but now it had changed. Next to Felix's square, Someone had added a new portrait. Me. No fancy lettering. Just a caption, he was here. And I was. Not just as a shadow or an afterthought. I had lived. I had mattered. The students passed the mural every day now. Some stopped to read. Some kept walking. But every once in a while, someone would pause a little longer, as if trying to understand something unspoken, as if learning how to listen. Back at the cemetery, the grass grew thicker around my grave. A bench had been installed beside it. Visitors came now and then, some who knew me, most who didn't. They came to sit, to think, to be quiet. And I stayed for a while longer, watching the seasons begin to shift. Until one day, the wind felt different. Lighter. A warmth rose in the air. I looked around. At Clara, who was smiling again, no longer haunted by the what-ifs. At Ashley, who had moved into advocacy work, supporting kids caught in the same silence I once knew. At my mother, who had finally found purpose not in power, but in compassion. And at Felix. Still healing. Still learning. But finally walking his path without pretending. And I knew. It was time. I stood above my grave one last time. I whispered words they could not hear. But I think somehow they felt them. I forgive you. I thank you. I love you. And then I stepped into the light. It was not blinding. It was not terrifying. It was warm. Like coming home. And in that final moment, I was no longer just a whisper in the hallway. I was no longer the forgotten brother. I was simply Sean. Seen. Heard. And free.